My name is Imad Harb, and I am the Director of Research and Analysis at Arab Center, Washington, D.C. I have today the distinct honor and pleasure to host the Honorable Mark Daou, a member of the Lebanese Parliament, to talk about current conditions in Lebanon. Mr. Daou is the co-founder of Taqaddum, a party espousing political, economic, and social change in Lebanon. He was elected last May in Lebanon's parliamentary elections as a representative of the Alay district in Mount Lebanon, defeating a representative of the political establishment, Talal Arslan. Deputy Daou, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it. I know you have a very busy schedule. I appreciate you giving us some of your precious time.
Thank you, Mr. Imad, and thank you for having me. This is a true honor. I wanted to do this with the Arab Center in specific on my first trip to DC as an MP, and hopefully this will reach out to the community and to your audiences. Thank you again.
Sure, you're welcome. We will definitely disseminate the interview. We need the whole community to hear what you have to say. Conditions in Lebanon, the least we can say are dire. There is a stalemated political situation, a collapsed economy, and very serious social maladies, social problems. What, in your estimation, should be the priority today, considering what's going on?
I think the major priority in Lebanon is divided among two things. The first one is reconstituting executive power. So we have decision making. That means electing a president, forming a government, naming a prime minister. Because currently we only have a caretaker government. We do not have a president. We've been in vacuum for the past 4 months. And I think any change, given the tough challenges waiting the country for some serious steps, require a fully constituted executive branch. The second is the finalization at the parliamentary level of the IMF required laws to be able to reform, get the currency to stabilize. We're a country that has lost 95% of the value of its currency, and we're still depleting reserves. And the Lebanese population is only getting 2 hours of electricity, and 80% have been qualified as poor in a multidimensional study. So different forms of poverty. So I think those are the top two priorities: getting the IMF deal and reconstituting executive power, which means president, prime minister, and a council of ministers.
Right. Just a little aside here. The caretaker government under Mr. Najib Mikati is being basically fought by many political factions. They don't want it to really be an executive authority, although in caretaker fashion. What's going on with that?
The government is fundamentally run by Mr. Mikati and a group of technocrats that represent various parties. Mainly, it is a leftover of Michel Aoun's last presidential government, and it has a third of its members which are aligned with his policies, which are diametrically opposed with Najib Mikati. So that government is limping forward to do some basic things, such as voting on getting fuel for the electricity company or fixing some of the electricity network in Lebanon. That's been a challenge because if one minister says no, they no longer have the 2/3 quorum. And when they don't have the 2/3 quorum, that means they can fundamentally lose the quorum and the vote, and therefore the government becomes inoperative. Currently, Mikati is trying to make that government work, but I think it's too limited and fragile to be able to rule. Plus, the constitutional prerogatives of that government are very limited in just caretaking jobs, which means they cannot vote on new things. They cannot take action steps to contain the financial situation or to appoint new leaders in positions which have gone vacant, particularly the upcoming vacancy at the Bank of Lebanon, Central Bank of Lebanon, with 6 months left for the central government in the midst of a crisis. So I think that is the limitation that faces the Mikati government, and this is why we need a government the soonest possible.
Thank you. You're a representative of the forces of change for the country. what can, I mean, where is the force for change today? And how can the forces of change today provide an alternative to what's going on?
Okay. The forces of change have a representation of 12 members of parliament, which is about 10%. Those come from different political parties, groupings, and region all across the country. So it's the only grouping which is multi-confessional, multi-regional, and that covers a lot of space, if you want, in Lebanese politics. It's a different breed of MPs, which I'm one of them, that has set foot on the stage, that has challenged political traditional parties, the geographic divisions or the sectarian divisions. So at that level, the forces of change are keeping up with accountability first. They're a force that is disrupting politics as it's traditionally conducted. We are putting a lot of pressure through the media, through street mobilization, through the release of activists when they're arrested, through defending the port explosion. We're redefining priorities when it comes to the regular horse trading between the sectarian traditional parties and focusing on fundamental issues such as prioritizing the IMF plan in the sense of making sure the banks are held accountable, making sure the distribution of losses is not at the expense of depositors, it's not at the expense of the general welfare of the public or state assets in terms of privatization or selling those. So these are things. Plus, we're working on judicial independence to protect the judiciary from interventions by political parties, which has become a regular or traditional action on behalf of traditional political parties. So these are the main things that we're focusing on. And I think that is aligned with a lot of mobilization in the streets, syndicate union and university elections, where we're starting to consolidate a lot of support and win elections versus traditional parties, not only at the parliamentary level, but also on every local level as well.
Right. In your question, you mentioned two different things. Very quite related, the Beirut port explosion in 2020, and what's happened last week with the split between judges and. Tell us a little bit about that, and where is the field of play now?
Okay, so on the 4th of August 2020, there was a massive explosion in Lebanon that killed 220 people, destroyed a third of the city or damaged a third of the city. 6,000 injured and many internationals killed as well, not only Lebanese. And it destroyed a large part of the port that imports 80% of what Lebanon consumes or uses. The 80% of Lebanese imports go through that port. So since then till now, the investigations have been ongoing. The first investigative judge he resigned after a lot of political pressure. The second investigative judge has been undermined continuously by political parties and those accused. Some of them are members of parliament and ministers who were responsible for the port, whether at the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Public Works. So at that level, both those people have filed 34 protestations against the judge, and they have undermined the capability of the judge to conduct his work. In addition to that, there has been a game that is being played to try and make the investigation crumble. So there's an Attorney General, Ghassan Awaidet, who decided to intervene in the investigation, and he issued orders to release all 17 people held for investigation. Some of them were accused, and he released all of them, which supersedes his authority and capabilities, undermining Judge Tariq Bitar, the official investigative judge in the court, who issued also a request to interview the Attorney General himself for certain actions that he accuses him of basically trying to manipulate the investigation. So we had a coup d'etat within the judicial courts by the Attorney General against the investigative judge. And now the battle is raging among the judiciary and the higher council of the judiciary to settle this off. The Lebanese Bar Association, as well as the Club of Judges, issued statements clearly indicting Ghassan Awaidet for violations of the judicial laws in Lebanon, and again supporting the continuation of the August 4 explosion investigation in that process. So I think the judiciary is under a lot of strain now to try and identify or get over this episode and go back to investigating the August 4th explosion. It's been 2 years and we haven't had a decision or an official accusation of the final members who are responsible for that horrendous crime that happened to the Lebanese.
Right. Yeah, thank you. This is, it's almost like an open-ended question. Everybody, I'm sure that everybody asks you, and so it's an often asked question about Hezbollah in the country. I mean, does Hezbollah control politics in Lebanon? What are the limits to its influence?
Yeah, Hezbollah is definitely the biggest dominant political party in Lebanon. Them through their allies, whether the Amal movement and the Free Patriotic movement of Michel Aoun and Gibran Bassil, who is sanctioned, continue to dominate politics in Lebanon. I think Hezbollah has limitations in how they conduct things in Lebanon, especially because they have no sense of orientation when it comes to economical policies. They are mainly focused on military operations, on regional dynamics, staying in line with Iranian policies when it comes to Lebanon and the region, and their involvement in the Syrian war in support of Bashar al-Assad, the dictator. So I think Hezbollah has always skewed the politics of Lebanon, and hijacked is probably the proper word. The politics and dynamics of Lebanon at the expense of the benefit of the Lebanese, who want to live in peace and who want to regain the economic status of their country. But Hezbollah's cover-up of smuggling operations, of military operations, of weapons, has constantly undermined the Lebanese state. Their cooperation with the Syrians and the Iranians, money laundering operations also has undermined the state. And then they have two allies who are like the figureheads of corruption in the country, who have overseen that corruption for the past 15 and 30 years for some of them. So they continue to protect those who cripple the Lebanese state and administration in doing the work it should be doing.
Right. Lebanon has always been influenced by regional issues, regional dynamics. What's going on in the region really has a lot of impact on what goes on in Lebanon. We're talking about two basic different camps. One that is friendly to Iran, so to speak, Syria, Iran, with Hezbollah in Lebanon. But then there is the Arab world at large, and specifically the Arab Gulf countries. What can you tell us about that? Who's influencing what today in Lebanon?
Okay. I think Lebanon's Arab relations have been severely damaged by the capture of foreign policy and the influence of Hezbollah and its allies in Lebanon. We still have a complete ban of travel in the UAE, in Saudi, in Qatar, in Kuwait to Lebanon. So citizens have to inform their states before they come to Lebanon. We still do not have an Emirati ambassador in Lebanon when they were pulled back a year ago. Saudi Arabia still bans products self-produced from Lebanon into its markets still today, after several Captagon issues that were smuggled in pomegranates and other vegetables coming from the narco state in Syria, or probably produced within Hezbollah-controlled areas. So fundamentally, our relations with the Arab world have been seriously damaged, and that has undermined the economic health and the ability of Lebanon to conduct proper economic policy and regain growth. Second, we still are on the regional level under heavy influence by the Iranians, and that has impacted because several ministers and members of parliament still visit Damascus, still coordinate with Hezbollah on regional politics. They issue statements that attack the Arab states and accuse them of intervening in Lebanon. And I believe that has undermined the situation. The only heavy involvement in Lebanon comes from Europe, in specific from France. The Europeans are the heaviest investors in Lebanon due to our large refugee population. We have about 2 million refugees in the country to a population of 4 million. In addition to that, we have a big issue with the French intervening after the port explosion. Their follow-up on IMF reforms, which has not yet gave fruition. So the entire situation is pretty complex. And therefore, I think at that level, the US continues to be highly committed to Lebanon. They were able to deliver the maritime deal between demarcating the borders, sea borders between Lebanon and Israel back in November of last year. So I think different actors are playing different roles, but the main weakness today in regional dynamics, there's an imbalance between French and US involvement versus the Arab countries' involvement. Qatar continues to try and play a role in Lebanon, being supportive of the Lebanese army, helping it with millions of dollars and other food supports to the Lebanese. But I think the Qataris are well aligned with the others. The major event when it comes to foreign policy is, I believe there's a meeting on the 6th of February in Paris that will include Qatar, Saudi, France, the US, and probably Egypt. And I think that will be a good step forward to bringing regional powers that have an active role in Lebanon or that can influence in Lebanon to get some results or some movement on electing a president, forming an executive branch, and hopefully some reforms.
Well, we certainly hope that the February meeting does have some influence on electing the executive authority, as you say. I really wonder whether Hezbollah is going to accept whoever is just democratically elected in parliament. I guess they do not want to go to a session without necessarily ensuring that a certain person that they like is elected as president. So it's a toughie. They say a glass is half empty or half full. We know what the half empty today in Lebanon is. Political, economic, social problems, devaluation of currency. It's the half full that people would like to believe in, would like to have. Basically the hope of what is happening, what will happen in the future. Where is the hope that you would point to today in Lebanon?
The way things look in Lebanon, Imad, today, it's probably 90% empty, 10% full. It's not half for sure. Right. But nevertheless, that 10% is worth it. I would basically advise people to look at what's happening in universities, how the change movement is winning a lot of those elections, to look at syndicates and unions, see how many independents are winning syndicates and unions and not traditional parties. I would point them in the direction of looking at the mass diaspora interventions in Lebanon and contributions. I take them to look into the shift towards alternative energies in households or across Lebanon. We've built 500 megawatts of energy through solar panels, whether for factories, hospitals, schools, or businesses and homes all across the country. So I think that 10% is of quality and it has significant indications strategically moving into the future. I think the old traditional parties, the old economy of monopolies and duopolies and oligopolies is being seriously undermined by the shifts that have happened now. And from there on, we should start moving in the right direction. This is why I think keeping in touch with the expat population, making sure we have good education in Lebanon. So when the time comes to rebound, we'll have enough talents and capabilities through our global network of Lebanese to directly rebuild this country. We're a small state. We have a lot of resources and a big achieved network of expats, plus a lot of expat funding coming into the country in terms of remittances, nearly 45% of GDP. So I think we have enough liquid cash flows coming into the country to allow us to build faster, better in no time. We just need political stability and the stabilization of the currency.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We took up enough of your time. I appreciate it. The Honorable Mark Daou, member of the Lebanese Parliament. We appreciate your time today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Imad. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Hope to be in touch also always with the center.